Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope you're all having a beautiful day. Hope the sun is shining. Hope the birds are singing. Hope the wind is at your back. Today I have with me Remzi Bajrami, and we're designing the systems that come after on value, collapse, and coherence. In a time of systemic strain and unrealized potential, Remzi works with clarity and discipline. He studies how economies function, where they fail, and what must replace them. Where others see disorder, he sees structure. Working across data, development, finance, and philosophy, his focus is coherence over control, designing systems that serve people rather than extract from them. His aim is a future where value moves freely, equitably, and with purpose. Remzi, thanks for being here today. How are you, my friend?
Thanks for having me, George. It's great to be back.
Yeah, I think it was about a year ago. I think we our last conversation was roughly about a year ago.
Almost, yeah. It was I think it was earlier this year. So yeah, it was.
Okay. Yeah, very nice.
There's been a lot happening since, and we're finally ready to move forward. So this is why I reached out.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to hear. Maybe you can catch people up to speed that maybe missed the last conversation. Like, what are you working on, and what are some of the things you're super excited about?
Sure. So, well, I'm the co-founder of Common Planet, along with my daughter, and it's basically the project is basically we wanted to introduce the world to an alternative economic system, one that's not based on debt, right? One that can enable life. And for the longest time, because it touches on everything, it was hard to describe it to people. And then a couple of years ago, we finally coined a name for it, calling it creditism. The reason being is because, of course, the current system operates with credit and debt. And so the future system, creditism, is one with just credit, with no debt. And so that's the name. Now, we've been developing the alternative economics, really for this past decade, mostly learning our internally. Like we had to ourselves understand economics a little bit better because it's a big field. Like you just touched upon, it touches everything: psychology, sociology, game theory. There is no aspect of the world in our lives that isn't directly connected to our economic system. So there was a lot to discover, but what we found, George, is that there is a path here. There is a transitionary path that we can move forward to change the game of the world so that we can start coordinating with one another for the first time really in history, because if we think about it, humans have always been in competition for presumably scarce resources, even though there's enough for everybody. There's enough food, there's enough housing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of strange. And obviously there's enough money, because money is a human, made up concept. So the idea that there isn't enough of these things is just flat out false. And so obviously that means that we have a distribution problem. We have a coordination problem. And so what creditism is designed to do is basically solve that problem so that we can live with one another in peace and prosperity. And so the reason why I reached back out to you today is because not only are we finally ready to come fully public and begin launch our own media, Substack is going to come out tomorrow. Our own YouTube channel is going to get launched in January. But beyond the educating the public in raising awareness and beginning the conversation about creditism in the world, we're also excited to announce that we're going to be launching a planetary membership to actually co-create and build the digital decentralized tools for digital credit, for digital governance, for digital record keeping, and all of that, so we can essentially overcome and just do it without permission and transition the world that way. And so that's the goal. That's the dream.
Man, I love it. I think that we're ready for it. We've seen quite a bit of this idea of scarcity and this idea of fear that seem to be the last drivers of productivity happening in our world, and we're ready for a change. Let me start here at the beginning though. I got some ideas and some questions that I think will help me understand and perhaps the audience understand a little bit more. What do you think where do you think the current system is most dishonest about its own health?
Debt. It's right? Dishonest because we're constantly told that our country is bankrupt, or at least
Right.
about to go bankrupt, and is in debt. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's nonsense, because we'll get to that in a moment, the details on it. But
Yeah.
it's just a false perspective. There is no debt, at least not at the national level, not in the way that people think of it. At least the government isn't borrowing money and spending it. It's spending it first and then sucking it out and having people put it in a time-locked savings account called a bond. And because the government has taken your money, your savings, and put it in a savings account, it's a liability for them. They have to give you that money back, but they have it. You gave it to them. The money is there. It's accounted for. It exists. It is not a debt in the traditional sense that, like you and I are, for example, if we go and buy a car, we take on a debt. We have to pay that money back because we've already spent it on the car, right? But the government hasn't spent that money at all. What it's spent into the economy, what it always spends into the economy, is credit. It is the sole authority and controller and issuer of the U.S. dollar. Every time Congress appropriates some spending bills, the central bank facilitates the number, boom, 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 boom. They type in the numbers, and the money is just spent and created into existence. I think I may have mentioned this last time, like the game of Monopoly. Like we've all
Right.
played the game of Monopoly. There's a so-called bank. The so-called bank in the game of Monopoly is your country, is your central bank. That's the source of the money. Every time it, under its rules, decides to spend money, in the case of the game of Monopoly, is based on time, and I guess we can say moving around the board is like labor. So it spends and gives it to the players. Now the players have the money. And even in the game of Monopoly, there is community chest and tax, right?
Yeah.
What happens? The money goes back to the so-called bank. It's being deleted. That's exactly what's happening in the real world. No different, really. These are digital units of account. That's all they are. And digital numbers are infinite. Always have been. And so the idea that money is scarce, the idea that governments are in debt and that the world can't afford things is just pure bunk and pure nonsense, and designed as a tool of essentially international banking to kind of disguise or make us think that debt is natural and inevitable, and it's just the way it is, and it has to be that way when it actually doesn't.
Yeah. One of the great books out there is The Creature from Jekyll Island, where they talk
I've read that
about
book.
the,
Yeah.
of course you have, like, and we have all these central banks, and then you got like the central bank in Switzerland. That's like the central bank of central banks. And
It is. Yeah. They make the rules.
they
You
make
know
the
what
rules.
I'd like to do, George,
Yeah,
which I've
please.
never heard anyone do before, is I want to go through the steps here. So
Okay, let's do
a
it.
lot of your listeners are probably familiar with opening up a corporation. It's really straightforward, right? You go to your state, you register the corporation, you register a name. It's not taken, it's yours. They give you an ID number. Now you're an official corporation. Then you register for a federal ID, number, so that you can have a bank account. Okay, so now you have a corporation. You are 100% its owner. And most businesses, they need money, because usually you have upfront expenses. You have to buy stuff, labor, equipment, whatever it is to launch most businesses. And most founders often don't have enough money. So what do? Right? They supposedly go out and find investors. What they're actually finding is they're finding buyers. They're selling their business. You're selling a piece of your business. The shares that you're selling are ownership stake in your business. And so the process of raising money is actually selling your business, a piece of it, for the money. And so that's what happens, right? You go out there, you find these investors, they give you money, you give them a piece of your business. Now you have money in your bank. That's a traditional corporation. Now, a bank is completely different. It's also a corporation, but here's what happens. Let's say you and I wanted to open up a bank. Okay, so first of all, with a bank, you have to have you go through the same processes. You register, do all that, but you have to find you need to have a minimum amount of capital, and so you have to find investors to pony up a lot of money, and they'll tell you how much. Let's say it's $100 million, and so we go out there and we get $100 million from a bunch of people. Now they collectively own, the bank, those shares. We take that money. Now we have money. We take that money and we deposit it in we open up an account. We're the only ones who can do this. Regular corporations open accounts with us at the bank. We open an account at the central bank, called a reserve account. Okay, so now we take our investors' capital, we put it into our savings account at the central bank called a reserve account. So now the investors' capital is sitting in the reserve account. Okay, so now we have, let's say it keeps things simple. We'll say $1 billion. So we have $1 billion in the reserve account. Now, in America, you also have to put money into the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation for banks, right? So a fraction of a percent goes into that pool. And so the money comes out of our savings account, goes to the FDIC. Okay. Now we have expenses ourselves, because remember, we're a business too. We have to, buy buildings or pay rent or pay employees, etc. And so we have a commercial account, an account with ourselves in our own bank. Okay. So we basically transfer money from the savings account to our commercial account, checking account, anytime we want, any time of day. Anytime we want to spend money, we transfer it instantly. So money comes out of the reserve account, goes to the commercial account. That's how we're spending. Now, a lot of people may think that, there was a movie that came out recently, a British film called Bank of Dave. And in the movie, they portray completely incorrect. They have the guy go out there and they say that you need to raise $15 million. But in the movie, they go out and they raise 15 million of depositors' money. They pretend, they keep insisting that this lie of banking, that you need depositors' money somehow, that's what a bank is, but it's not. Like I just mentioned, they have investors. We have our pile of money sitting in the reserve account. Okay, so now, according to the Bank of International Settlements, because we have this $1 billion in our reserve account, we have the special privilege to borrow money into existence. This is the so-called double entry bookkeeping. A lot of people and economists call this credit creation, but that's not true, because credit is credit. Debt is debt. They're not the same thing. Otherwise, they would be the same damn word. Okay. Credit means if I give you credit, it means it's yours for free. You don't have to pay me back. If I give you debt, it means you owe it back to me. So banks are debt merchants. They're borrowing money into existence. They're not credit creators. So when this special power that banks have, because they have this $1 billion of reserves that they can afford to lose, they're allowed to borrow this money into existence. And then what do? Legally, they're purchasing assets. Okay. They're not lending money out. They're buying a loan contract. That's an asset. And so the double entry bookkeeping that everyone talks about with banking is them borrowing the money into existence. That's a liability. That's money they have to pay back. Those are the international banking rules for all banks in the world. It's liability. What is on the asset side? They record the asset, the thing that they purchase, your loan contract, your mortgage, your car loan, your credit card, etc. That goes on their asset side, and that's how the whole structure works. And so these guys are allowed this leverage. That $1 billion, the Bank of International Settlements says that we are allowed to borrow up to more than 20 to 30 times that $1 billion into existence. And so now what's happening, George, every time us as a bank, when we're always trying to find, assets to purchase, but there isn't that, but because we're banks and because we're leveraged, we're restricted on what types of assets we can purchase. Normal corporations can buy whatever they want. There are no rules. You can buy bonds, stocks, real estates, derivatives, options. Nobody cares. It's your private business, right? But a bank is different. They can't do that because obviously they would crush the game and they would be very dangerous, of course, but they're only allowed to buy these loan contracts. And so it's no surprise that in America, what you've seen in the past 50 years or more is more and more debt, more and more types of debt, right? It started with, of course, businesses and governments. Then it moved on to homes. Then it went to cars. Now it's like everything. You can buy a freaking toaster with debt. It's absurd. Refrigerators. So education, everything has become, debt-based for the sole reason that it's basically free interest for the banks. They're able to borrow this money at zero interest and then you use it to purchase assets and put us in debt at interest. And that's their entire business model. And that's what's happening here. And that's what a bank is. And so people may not realize banks came first, then corporations essentially. Well, corporations, I mean, capitalism obviously was already happening, right? But the notion of corporations in the sense of limited liability and spreading your risk, right? Not putting all of your assets or monies into one venture, that became the corporate shell. Italians famously, right? Buying, stuff, putting on ships, and only that ship is at risk. And of course, they would get multiple investors. So banks came first, corporations at the same time. Then nations came later. Why? It was a structure to codify by law and enforce this property and trading regime, and of course their ability to borrow money into existence, and to essentially to keep that secret. Because you see, if you're a country, what's happening in the world today is that countries are creating a currency and they're purchasing stuff, right? What are they purchasing? Well, they're purchasing oil. They're purchasing natural resources. And so that money, they're basically creating money to give to whoever owns the oil, whoever owns the trees, to the capitalists, to the owners, the owner class. And so that's the entire structure. Now, if people really knew that money was unlimited and that the country is able to spend whatever it wants, whenever it wants, on whatever it wants, then the question would be, well, okay, clearly these are political and decisions and social decisions. So why is it doing what it's doing? But this is why it's important for the state and the whole entire structure to pretend that they can't do that they must borrow money and that somehow they're monetarily restricted in what they can do. Otherwise, the whole entire scheme of banks borrowing money into existence would be untenable. We would have already overcome that situation. We would have changed those rule sets, and we would be playing a different game. As a matter of fact, in America, we've already had revolutions in monetary systems multiple times. I don't think I shared this with your audience, but the American Revolution itself was a monetary revolution. We didn't go to war with Britain because of why did we go to war with Britain? What is the general story, by the way? Like how do you see, like, why did we all of a sudden want to be independent and want our own country? Why didn't
I think it was taxes, right? Like with the Boston Tea Party.
Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so let's here's what happened. In 1767, the British Crown banned the colonists from creating their own currency. They banned them from borrowing money into existence. They said, no, you have to use the gold coins of the crown. And so what was happening is that that they were unable to borrow money into existence meant that they were unable to grow. They can't invest in build new trains, buildings, and et cetera, because if you don't have money, then you can't begin you can't order stuff. You can't purchase materials and labor and build, right? Because you need the money first. And so because they couldn't borrow it into existence, credit creation, they were starting to lose. The gold that they had was being taxed. The tea tax was directly flowing to the UK. And so over the years, they were less prosperous. More and more money was flowing out of their territories. They weren't growing anymore. And so that was untenable to them. And so what they did is they said, F this, this is unacceptable. They wrote a Declaration of Independence. This is why these are the reasons why we should and we are allowed to, and we are compelled to, dissolve whatever. And so they borrowed $1 billion of gold from France. They used that as their reserve currency, and they created their own currency. And they used that money to provision themselves and win the war. And that's the story of America. And then the further story of America is that every single time that these bank charters of who's going to control the money, is it going to be a central bank, an independent central bank? Is it going to be a bank direct by America, or what? And so there was always charters giving these powers over to this other entity, and then back to the state. And there was always these fights throughout our history. And so, but we haven't had one in a long time. We're sitting in the system now, with that creature of Jekyll Island. It's for over 100 years. We're stuck in the power of banks and this debt-based structure, and we can't get out of it because we're gaslit, because we're lied. Every piece of language is twisted in such a way as that we don't understand what's happening, and it's strange to me. It's strange, because even for someone like myself, who I thought I was smart. I studied finance all my life, but I never had asked myself about money, like where did it actually come from? It's just something that we just don't, for some reason, so central to our lives, but for whatever reason, we're not allowed to ask or know where it comes from. It makes no sense. It's shocking to me that we can be so stupid.
Yeah, it blows my mind to think of. And the question that comes to my mind, and I agree 100%, and I think anybody who starts really digging into the problems of their life or the community or the environment or your state or whatever, all of a sudden you eventually trace it back to money. Why are they doing this? Oh, they need the money. Why is there so much homelessness? Well, you have these NGOs that just get money and then they create more homeless people. There's no incentive for it, but it comes back to this idea of money. My question, Remzi, is that, power is never relinquished. It's only taken. So what do you do when you have these giant entities whose tentacles spread out across the world? These people are not going to give up their secrets. They're not going to give up their control of the money, their power. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, there was an interesting book I read, which I would recommend to your readers as well.
Please.
It's called, hold on a second, James Carse. Darn it, I forget the title right now. Hold on.
It'll come to you. Check it out.
Oh, yeah. Finite and Infinite Games.
Okay.
Essentially, what he says is that those who must play, can't play. What we're playing, this global economic game, these guys have power, but the power is in the rules, rule set. And the rules are something that we either can follow or not. And so the power is in our court. The challenge, though, George, has been that we don't like the current game. We don't like the current incentives and the current rules, but we've never been actually able to figure out an alternative rule set, an alternative incentive structure that can not only overcome, of course, the existing game, but produce something that's stable and viable and infinite. And so that's what creditism is designed to do, but that's just it. We haven't been able to do that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The main reason I'll point out to in the past has been because of game theory, has been because of trust. If we're playing a game of distributing resources and value, then it becomes a game of trust. Do we trust that our opponents or our counterparties are going to continue the past agreements? Are they going to agree that what I have is still mine? Or are they going to defect and say, F that, I don't recognize your currency, or I don't recognize your rights to this. And so because in the past, there was no way to assure record keeping, at least in a unalterable way, because records were kept either in our head or on paper. And unfortunately, those, aren't very effective and trustworthy, right? Records can be changed. But now all of a sudden we have digital technology with unalterable records. Now we can trust the data. Now we can trust our past agreements, and we can move forward and have a different incentive structure. And so anyway, to answer your question, to overcome the existing power structure, we basically just have to defect. We have to build an alternate incentive structure, an alternate game of credit, of currency, and overtake theirs, because they get their power from the games, from the rules, and from the existing money. But once we don't acknowledge it anymore, they're powerless, because they won't be able to command people with their money if people have an escape path, if people have an alternate that they can join and survive in, then the power that these existing oligarchs and corporations and nations have over us disappears and withers. And so we effectively are giving them that power because we're going along and playing their game. So we have no choice but to create an alternative. And that's what we're doing with IU, planetary play for life, where we can distribute currency under different conditions without their consent. And they can't stop us because, these are things that, we believe. These are things that, we can do. Humans are the ones who are the players. And so we don't have to play their game. But we have to create a new game, and that's been the bottleneck, is that there hasn't been a new game that really was stable, viable, and attractive. I mean, attractive, sure. Socialism, communism are very attractive philosophies, right? But they're not fully baked, stable, complete economic systems. They don't have the entire structure, for a viable infinite game. That was the problem. And the reason they didn't have it is because they're still actually playing capitalism. They just didn't know it. Meaning, and here's how I would define it, by the way. The foundation of our economic system today it begins just like in the game of Monopoly, right? Somebody has to own stuff. Somebody has to own the oil, the trees, the fish. Every single thing on this planet becomes somebody's private property. And so what you're doing in this world at present and for a long time is we're creating the unit of account, the money, in order to then give it to these people who've captured our common resources. The Saudi Arabians, the Norwegians, etc., are getting the money for doing nothing. It's almost like, imagine in the game of Monopoly, you pre-distribute the property. You pre-distribute Park Place and all these other resources, and they automatically collect money every single time because, let's say, they own the oil, right?
Right.
Oil's in everything. Energy is embedded in the price of everything that we purchase because everything costs energy. Everything must be moved. And so we're paying for that. So we're creating the money to give it to these people because they're the ones who won this battle centuries ago of owning. It just happened to have been born in that area. It makes no sense. So we're distributing the currency without realizing we're distributing currency. Like, it's a distribution problem. But we don't see it that way. We see it as people like, oh, well, it's theirs. So we can't take it from them. It's like, well, how did they get it? Who did they buy it from? Did they buy it? Like, did God hand out titles? Because I don't know that. I wasn't in that auction. So this is, the whole game. Like, look what we're doing right now. What is America doing? Why are we going to war with Venezuela? Why? Because of the oil. Because it's free money. It's free money. That's why. And so this is the problem with capitalism, socialism. Well, maybe not socialism so much. Well, yeah, definitely socialism and communism. They couldn't overcome the foundational structure of pre-distributing the valuable resources, which themselves are then traded for the money. So it's almost like you're giving them money for no reason. And so this is the fundamental problem of the world. We're continuing to play that bullshit game we're not realizing that we have a distribution problem. And it's not because we can't do things differently. It's because the ones who are currently winning love it.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they? Who wouldn't love it?
How do you fix that distribution problem? I mean, like, we haven't fixed it ever. Like,
it's never been fixed. And the problem is that we've made the distribution political, and the redistribution is political. And it's like so the distribution is unfair,
right? Of course.
And then the redistribution becomes unfair too. And then people get upset. They're like, "You're taking my tax dollar." It's like, that's redistribution. By the way, no one's taking your tax dollars and giving it to somebody else, right? They're just taking your tax dollars. That's all that's happening. They always, their money's infinite, so they can give to whomever they want, anytime, anyways. They didn't need your tax dollars to give to somebody else. The money's already being created and given away as it is, anyways. So the whole, I don't know, man. It's just really frustrating when I think about the situation that we're in. But I don't want to talk about that too much, because what's more important is, what are we going to do about it?
That's right.
What can we do? So that's really why I came to the show, to talk about what we can actually do and what we're going to do to overcome them.
Let's hear about it, man. Like, what are we going to do? Like, what is the way moving forward?
Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that myself, my daughter, and our small team is going to be moving forward with educating the world about creditism. We'll talk about a little bit about that a little bit later in the
Yeah.
show, on the details on creditism. But so as we begin our media campaign, right, articles, videos, white papers, et cetera, and all of that, and conversations, obviously, like this, and then we imagine that next year, as conversation increases and awareness increases, that other people will begin to talk about it because now it has a name, like socialism and communism. I won't be the only one talking about creditism anymore. And so that's really the key. But really, George, what we're going to be launching in a couple of months is I have some really tech dynamos, and these guys we're going to be creating an application. And so we're going to incentivize people to join a network and give them, points and tokens. And so we're going to reward people to join the network for the participation, to do things like, obviously, to confirm their identification, to make sure that people don't register multiple times. That's obviously important, right? You need a unique identifier. And then we can reward them for all kinds of activities, referring people, signing treaties and constitutions, joining various other networks, social networks, whatever it may be, or contributing to regenerative projects. And so we can begin to create the creditist principles of distributing the currency inside this new planetary membership. And at first, when we launch it, it'll be invite only, because we still want to, we still going to be playing around with it, adding features and tools to it, and ironing out any bugs, etc. And so in the first, iteration, probably 6 months or so, it'll be invite only. And so the order of the, invite would be the people who contribute to the project, right? So what we're doing at this early phase is we're going to be launching probably tomorrow.
Nice.
So everything will be updated tomorrow. And we'll begin posts on Substack, and we'll begin to, send emails to all of our networks to contribute to the project. And in return, they're going to be put into a Patreon pool. Basically, it's a non-dilutive pool of 1% of the points for the early contributors to reward them. They're going to get more than just the points. There's also further benefits later where they can get more of the future credit currency. Because of their early contribution. And so there's incentives for people to obviously to contribute to the project and join the network. Those patrons will be among the first to be invited into the network. Along with, we're going to have a partner pool. There's going to be two pools. 1% of the points will go to two separate pools. So 1% for the first 150 partners, and then another 1% for like 300 partners. And what a partner is basically, it's an individual or organization that's working on some of the regenerative or commons, recommoning of our resources, right? Somebody, there's a lot of people out there who are working on helping us solve this, meta crisis, this poly crisis. Mm-hmm. And so those are free. Anybody will be able to apply to be a partner as an individual or organization. You come to the site, you apply, and it'll be myself mostly who's reviewing these at this time, because we are a small team and everyone's busy. But yeah, so people will be able to apply, and those partners will enter in that pool, and they'll also be among the early members of the network. And we're calling it Ayu, by the way, and it means life in Sanskrit. And so, the name we're going with is Ayu. It's short, AYU. And we're calling it Planetary Play for Life, or the Infinite Game. I mean, we can have a whole series of qualifiers and subtitles for it. But essentially, it's a planetary network, planetary membership, where people will be joining for free, getting points and ultimately future currency and tokens, and interacting with other people and helping us basically build the decentralized tools, like I mentioned earlier as well, the governance structure, the voting mechanisms. We have experts for that on the blockchain. We have the property record keeping, which is obviously important, right? You want to make sure that we can have an open digital architecture of everything that exists, not just on a personal level, but also the commons as well, the entire Earth. And so that's going to be geographical information systems and mapping and structures. And recently I found a map, somebody had mapped out in 3D all of the structures in the entire world, which is really cool. And so things like that, we can incentivize our members to help us build and that data by giving them more points or tokens for their activity. And so as we're growing this network, eventually we'll open it to the general public, and then anybody will be able to join in the network. In IU, we can also begin implementing some of the what is been up to date called UBI, universal basic income. The language isn't ideal. It's a better framing is unconditional income, because it's not basic and it's not universal. It's unconditional in the sense that everyone gets it with no strings attached. You don't have to do anything for it. It's just yours. Here you go. And so there will be an unconditional income component, inside IU as well. And the incentives of the network are that the earlier you join the network, the more points and or tokens that you might get in the future. And so there's reasons for people to want to have to join earlier. There's kind of there's already a precedence for this, right? I don't know if your audience is aware of WorldCoin and Sam Altman's World ID project. It's a bit of a scam in that Sam raised a whole bunch of money from investors, right? Offering people free coins, free tokens. If you join our network, scan your eyeball and or do the other identifiers to confirm your identification, you get free tokens. That's great. And so and a lot of people signed up. Millions of people have now signed up for that program, because why not? You get something for free. What's to lose? What Sam gets out of it, of course, is he gets to license your digital ID to whomever he wants. And so he's trying to do that. He's trying to license that data, your ID, to other people so that you can, use it online, and he'll keep the money. That's their business model. That's their kind of scheme. But it's a scheme because he's pretending to care and to solve the poverty or the not enough money with UBI when it's not a solution. UBI by itself isn't really a viable solution in the existing system, and so he's not genuine. But we can use those similar incentives to build a network, and it's proven. Obviously, people will sign up for something for free, and so that's kind of where some of those incentives may be not the best, right? Like ideally we want people to join the network because they believe in this alternative vision and they want to help us co-create it, not because of the points of the tokens, right? But of course that helps too. All incentives are fine with that. And so that's basically the structure. So we'll have invite only people join the network, the donors, the partners. And as that network is growing and building, as we're out there, growing awareness on creditism, writing articles, ultimately a book on it, who knows where it's going to take us? Who knows where it's going to go? But that building this digital open architecture with other people and with other partners and projects to capture value from the existing game, from the existing world, and to funnel it to these different projects, to these different regenerative commons, recapturing of the commons, people, then we begin to change the world. Then we begin to change where the world is investing. Where are we investing our time and energies, as opposed to today, we're still investing in our 401ks. We're still playing the long game of capitalism because we're stuck in this. We have to, right? But this really can offer people an off-ramp in a path to a future where they don't have to worry about money ever again. And really that's what's at stake here. A coordinated system. We're either going to kill ourselves over the resources of the world under this stupid game that we're playing, or we're going to finally wake up and say, hey guys, this is reality. We've mapped out the world. Let's let everyone live and play.
I need you to help me understand a little bit more in that. Like
Sure.
what is it that, when say investors come in, I guess there's two questions. First off, how do you stop the arbitrage? It seems to me like if you look at the world of cryptocurrency, even Bitcoin, you got like Michael Saylor that owns most of it, or you have my friend from the Matt, or I forgot the guy from the Orange team, Max Kaiser. There's all these Bitcoin billionaires, and like they own all of it. Like I can't even buy a Bitcoin for like less than 80 grand now, and I guarantee it gets smaller. But that's just one example. When you look at all these other
Yeah.
sort of blockchain currencies, like there's
Yep.
so many of them that like people are begun to get like Bitcoin or cryptocurrency fatigue, and there's all these rug pulls because people
Yep.
arbitrage. Like how is creditivism different? If you're on the blockchain, how
Yeah.
is it different?
No, you're right. That's a great question. So we have been having some internal conversations and internal, discussions on that as well. So the difference is here, though, George, is that you're right. These are all speculative assets, is what they are, by the way. They're not currencies, because a currency can
Right.
only be issued by a national government, right?
Right.
The currency is the dollar, Australian
Right.
dollar, the rupee, the yen,
Right.
the yuan, etc. Those are currencies. The Bitcoin, the game that we're playing, capitalism, is a game of trading assets. Currencies just happen to be, at present, abstract assets.
Right.
And but Bitcoin is only purely an abstract asset and not a currency. So, as anyone can trade an asset, anyone you can trade your money or your laptop or your car for anything with anyone else that you guys can agree on. That's capitalism. No one cares, right? If you give your car for a laptop, they don't care. If you give your car for a Bitcoin, nobody gives a crap, because they're both presumably, what are you trading? You're trading assets. But you're right to point to speculation as a problem. Now, here's where IU points and or future tokens or et cetera aren't necessarily speculation. Okay, so first of all, we're not selling any of them. They're always going to be granted for free. The members who join the network are getting them for free. They don't have to purchase them. You join the network, you confirm your ID, you're going to get the points and or future tokens. You join, you refer people, more points, more tokens. You sign constitutions, more, so you're getting them for free. First, so we're not selling them like Ripple did with XRP, and they continue to do. Right, that's a scam. Okay, and so the only speculators in our network, should we decide to make the points into tokens and tradable, which is still an internal debate within our team, then there would be speculators. Some people, just like with WorldCoin, are speculating on it. You can buy Bitcoin, WorldCoin, without joining the network, and you will be able to. If we do the same thing, you'd be able to buy the IU tokens and speculate. But the members themselves didn't get them through speculation. The members themselves aren't speculating, and it is possible for us to incentivize people to hold some of these tokens, because part of the plan here with creditism, with IU, is that there are not just one token or points. There's at least two. There's the current one, which is the points in our token, and then there's the credit currency, the future currency, which is think of it like it's like an NFT almost, right? It's not tradable. It's only for you, and so it's not speculative. But it could become your money in your country if you can help your country transition to creditism. That credit currency, that token, would then become live on chain and yours and usable. And so the real goal with IU is essentially to co-create the digital alternate digital economic system, and then be politically adopted by any country. Countries already have the power of credit creation. They could transition to creditism right away, no problem. I mean, not that easy, of course, but it can be done because they're already doing it. They already have, money already exists. Anyway, so, but the key here is that we could incentivize people to hold on to the IU points and or tokens that would, a portion of which could then convert into the credit tokens. And so we can kind of manage, if you will, some of the potential and remove some of the potential speculation out of this, because the reason why people ultimately should want to own IU points and or tokens is because of the future of the credit token, not of the present value of their token, if that makes any sense. Like WorldCoin, for example, if you join the WorldCoin network and you get in these tokens, it's not that much money. So who cares, right? You're not gonna get rich by joining that network and getting a bunch of free UBI WorldCoin tokens. Same thing here. You're not going to get rich by joining IU and getting some points in their tokens. It's not going to happen. But so yeah, will there be speculators if the token is tradable? There will be. But are we concerned about it? Some of us are, yeah. And so we're still kind of debating that piece of it, whether or not the points will turn into tokens and become tradable. But there are pros and cons to doing that, as you're kind of realizing and pointing out. But again, so really the people who are joining our network and who are participating in what we're building should be more interested in what we're building rather than any value that they may get through the tokens that they're getting. And so if that's true, then great. But if it's not, and they only care about speculation, well then, who cares? They can speculate on any number of things, right? We can't stop them from necessarily from speculating on some of these things, but we can make it so that we could stabilize it. We can control a lot of the more of the value than people realize. Like you mentioned, rug pulls. Those guys intentionally engineered those things. Those weren't accidents. They were intentional, and so you could, with this kind of structure, we could stabilize it. We could only because we get to control the future currency. We get to decide, the distribution rules of creditism, the mathematical fairness of it determines the value of the credit. And so determines the conversion ratios, et cetera. And so it's in our control. We get a lot of power and control over those conversions since we're the ones who are issuing those tokens and points.
Yeah,
so it is different than those projects.
When you look at some currencies in the past that began to take hold, they always start like in the community. Like a town will start issuing like their own credit or their own coin or something like that, and it begins organically. Can you run us through an example of what it looks like? How does it start? Like maybe you've already started it in your community, but what does it look like when people are trading this value between each other? Break it down on a real small scale so people can understand.
Well, what you're referring to are called LETS systems. They're called local exchange trading systems, and there are examples throughout history, of course. And at present, all over the world, and communities are attempting to do this, but it's not the solution, by the way, because what they're creating is, and I hate to call it a currency, but but it's more an abstract asset than a currency, really, because in my definition, currencies have issuance and deletion, and a lot of these schemes, they don't have deletion, they only have issuance. They'll have a certain quantity, and what they generally do, George, is if you create a currency locally, like the Berkshire bucks or Ithaca dollars and the Bristol dollars. In the UK, they've got a lot of experiments with these local exchange trading systems. Germany had one, a famous one. I forget the name of it. Something with a W, but in the 30s or something, and it was fantastic. It's successful. What it does is it, like credit creation, like borrowing money into existence that America first started with, it allows for the growth. It allows for you to purchase materials and to begin that cycle of investment, begin play the game. And so LETS trading systems are great for circularity, are great for increasing the velocity of money moving in locally, like essentially increasing everyone's incomes in a way. Right.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it, remember, capitalism is a zero-sum game. If your community is winning, somebody else is losing. And so you can create a local exchange trading system, but you're not going to change the game. All you're doing is you're plugging in to the same game of creating an abstract asset and continuing to base value based on the exchange of assets. And that's a terrible way to distribute value. By value, I'm using the word value here. To point at true currency, like how famously money has presumably multiple features, right? It's a unit of exchange. it's a store of value, it's this and that. Currency is a unit of exchange. That's all it needs to be. All it has to be is like points in sports, right? And so as long as it can be exchanged, that's all it needs to be able to do. So I lost track for a second there. All right, get me back on track.
We were talking about local currencies and lets, and then you brought up the point of deletion, which I think is where you're moving to. Like, there is no
right.
deletion.
There isn't. Well, even so, even if there were, there would be more creation. But it's still, again, it's still plugging into the same system of distributing the value, the currency based on our exchange and trade rather than other things. So what creditism does, it says, hey, look, currency, value, the unit of exchange, if you will, can be distributed to people because we all need it, by the way. Why do we need a unit of exchange? Why do we need currency? Simple, because we have to use it as a choice-making tool of what to consume and use from the market. We all must consume things, food, materials for housing, clothes, couches. So we need a currency, a unit of exchange to exchange for and to choose those things, right? But so the question then becomes, well, is the stuff the same as the currency? If it is, then you're not playing creditism, you're playing capitalism. You're still distributing the currency based on the capture and trade of the stuff. That's capitalism. And so what creditism is saying is, let's stop that. Let's stop distributing currency based on trade and distribute it under different conditions. And what are those conditions in creditism? Well, it's number one, humanness, unconditional income. Here's some money that everyone gets the same amount every month. Here, you have currency. What does that do for you? Well, now you have a unit of exchange to choose what to consume from the market. Perfect. You've solved poverty so far, right? You're distributing the currency based on humanness, universal amount. And how much that is, what percentage of the total amount of money or currency that you're distributing to individuals is irrelevant right now. Obviously, we need to do some modeling and simulations to optimize those flows. But whatever that is, as it's changed, it's still fair because it applies to everyone. And so you have a universal flow of currency that goes to every single person. Then, instead of basing exchange based on capture, who can own the oil, who can own the trees, who can own the farm, who can extract the gold and the diamonds and the fish, et cetera, we say, no, who's actually doing activity, who's doing the labor, who's teaching, who's caretaking. Those activities then become credit creation. They are the ones who get the currency. And so now you're distributing currency for real human purposes rather than through competition of ownership and trade. And then the third piece actually kind of mimics, in a way, but better, trade. So we call it bonus. And it's complicated, but essentially it is, imagine it's like sports, but for corporations. So I would always use bike manufacturers for some reason. You have bike manufacturers, they're making bikes, right? So this year, the bonus, like more money, is going to go to those producers, those employees, and that co-op who produce these other metrics that are set annually by various either industries, communities, or sub-tiered councils. However those decisions are made, they're made. So, for example, the metrics could be this year. It's not going to be who can sell the most bikes. Who cares? How is that relevant, right? No. What's important will be who can who can reduce energy costs. In making the bikes. Can you reduce your energy input? Because we still need to conserve energy because we're still using gas and oil and all the other non-renewables. Who can reduce labor? Who can make the bikes last longer? Who can make the bikes lighter? Who can, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever the metrics are for the bonus, now we can incentivize production towards human purposes rather than who can sell the most, which is a game of power. Let's be honest. Trade is a game of power. Who can sell oil? It's a game of power. Not Venezuela. America can, Saudi Arabia can, but not Venezuela. We won't allow them to. And so trade is bullshit. Determining, value in currency distribution based on trade alone, it means that we're always going to be creating scarcity. We're going to be creating, you already know, all of the negative externalities of capitalism, of making products that break, right? It makes no sense to make a light bulb that lasts forever, a refrigerator that lasts 100 years, because the whole game is about selling and buying. And so you have to make it break.
Right.
And so anyway, those are embedded in that logic of trade. You remove that logic and you change the incentive structure, and now you've got a distribution of currency that is fair, infinite, and now when you've given out this currency to people as a universal income, as a more for their participation, which is human purpose based, right? There's a reason we want people to do these things. We want people to play, to learn, to work. And every time they do those things, the person who did it, not the owner, not the guy who owned the thing, they don't know. Only the people get the money, not the corporations. There is no, such ownership structure anymore. You don't need those complex financialized schemes in creditism. And then, because nobody owns the oil, because nobody owns the fish, because you've gotten rid of that ownership class, the money simply deletes when you use it to buy something. When you purchase a fish or a couch in the market, the money deletes. Simple as that. Currency is infinite. Life is infinite. There's always going to be more people coming and going and being born and dying. And same thing with money. Money is always going to be created and deleted. And it'll always be stable. You can never run out. We can always issue more. So the currency portion becomes separate, sort of, from the capture of the stuff. You don't have to fight over who owns the building or a corporation or these fractionalized speculative assets known as stocks or crypto or any other abstract asset anymore, because what are you even doing? Like, how is that even valuable? I used to be a trader, by the way, successful and not. I had some winning years and some losing years. That's how it goes, because basically it's all, of course, is betting, is gambling. That's what speculation is, right? You're hoping that this whatever thing that you purchased, you're going to be able to sell it for more money. But what are you actually producing in the world? Nothing. What did you actually do? Nothing. I didn't do anything. The years I made a lot of money, what did I actually do in the world? At the time, the justification that I was led to believe was that I was offering liquidity to the market, and therefore I was doing a good service to the system. So that's why I was being rewarded, because of my liquidity. It's all bullshit. It's all nonsense.
What about, first off, I love the idea. I love the idea of passing go and getting your $200 and incentivizing the people that are actually doing the work.
Yeah.
But how do, again, that doesn't come without a fight. The people that own the oil in Saudi Arabia, those guys will chop your hands off, man. You're not coming to get their oil. Or same thing with the banks. They're not going to let that stuff go quietly.
I know. Listen, this is part of the reason why, George, I haven't been public and open about this kind of stuff, is because I didn't really want to be on their radar, naturally. But honestly, we have no choice. But the way we move forward, the way that the transition happens, of course, is that the idea is that, okay, we don't want to. Obviously, these people we're going to have to decentralize wealth and power. That's a given. I mean, that's unfortunate. That's the reality. But we don't have to take everything from them, right? We don't have to make them equal to us. We can. What creditism is saying is that, make these people whole. Let them keep what they have, but the stuff that should never have been privately owned, like the oil, farms or buildings or corporations, etc., they're going to cash out. So if you own stock, if you own Bitcoin, if you own whatever corporation you own, you're going to get the equivalent value of it in the new currency. And you're basically cashing out, because that is no longer the game. If you were if you own 100 pieces of property that you're renting, well, guess what? You don't live in them. They're not actually yours. You're not using them. They're only a vehicle for you to collect this rent. Therefore, you have to cash out. Whatever value you have in those homes, they're not yours anymore. But here's the money that is yours. That was yours in the last game. We're gonna buy it back. And so, what's this?
Douglas Harrison comes up. He says, newsflash, the United States was long ago conquered by corporate economic plutocrats and imperialists. I realize this sounds bad, but I honestly don't give a shit who you vote for in November. And the real power in this country also doesn't give a shit who you vote for. If you think that the unelected power of the private sector corporate industrial complex is going to entrust the American public with deciding how things are going to be run and is who is going to run things, you're not living in the real world. What are your thoughts on my friend Douglas Harrison?
I mean, he's correct, obviously. I mean, we all know this, really, right? We know that the game of power, money, right? The state exists for individual corporations and individuals to use it to benefit, right? Like we want the state to make laws and or rules to benefit my team. And so, we're going to capture that process, that decision-making process, and who gets to decide who distributes the majority of the money in the game? Obviously, the country does. Look at the spending of our country. We spend what? How much do we spend a year? 3-4 trillion a year? No, excuse me. We're not talking about 5 or 6 or 7 trillion a year. That's a lot of money. And so, that's if you can influence that spending, well, then to your industry, your corporation, why would you not do that? Everyone's going to do that, and that's the game that has devolved, and it's open corruption, obviously.
Totally.
And so you're not gonna, the only way to overcome that, like I was suggesting with creditism, is that it has to be at the national level. It is a country that makes the rules on property, on corporations, and on currency. And so it is a country that can recapture, reclaim these assets if it wants to. But famously, just like every country, that has attempted to reclaim their commons, like communism, has been met with massive aggression and force and violence. But that's because they were localized. They weren't international at scale, and they didn't have an infinite. They didn't have creditism. Basically, they had the foundation of capitalism, but they were calling it something else. But they were wanting to play the same thing on a local level, and it's like playing the game of Monopoly, reshuffling the board, and playing the game all over again. And of course, it'll go into inequality all over again. And that's what the history has shown. Okay, so what's this guy saying?
This is my friend Lila Lang. Everybody check out the Lila Code. She's got some amazing work out there. Thank you to Douglas. Thank you to Lila for being here. She says, what structured constraint makes this model behave differently from previous regenerative or non-debt systems, rather than reproducing the same governance and control dynamics?
That's a good question. And I think it was just to what I was alluding to in a moment, is that they're still playing the game of capitalism. They're still distributing value based on the stuff, based on trade. And so even if they had, like, Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, all these other, Cuba, et cetera, communist countries that maybe were distributing their currency under non-debt-based systems, and doing regenerative practices. But the problem is that the global game, which many people that I know we call Game A, is still based on the capture and exchange of the stuff. So even at a national level, the accounting that you're keeping with other countries, even though you have independent corporations, whatever, is based on trade. And so that win-lose dynamic of, what is the value of your resources? It's like you can even have the most valuable resources in the world, like Venezuela and oil, and yet still not be allowed to participate and play and sell at the correct value because of the political, and violence of other players, of the dominant players like America. And so, so rather than reproducing, that's just it. The Game A is all these other attempts of changing the game, changing the structure, actually didn't change the foundation. They continue basing the foundation of the game based on extraction and trade of the stuff. And you're forced to do that on an international level. the USSR. Internally, of course, no one cares. Like a family, no one cares how you distribute the money in your household. They don't care if you give the money equally or unequally to your children or your brothers or sisters. No one gives a crap, right? But with the outside parties, with the other countries, you have no choice but to play capitalism. The Bank of International Settlements creates the rules for the banking structure for them to be able to create the money in your country. And of course, your country has its own power of credit. And that's the design. And so as far as I'm concerned, no attempt of any kind internally is going to work until the entire structure is no longer game A, until the entire world is no longer distributing currency, value based on trade. We're going to keep getting what we're getting. We're always going to be fighting over the stuff. If the stuff is the source of the points, then of course we're going to be fighting for that. And that's the problem. The stuff isn't. So here's what I like to say. Like the Copernican revolution, we used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe, right?
Right.
At present, we think the stuff is the center of our economic universe. No, dude, it's life. It's us. We're at the center. So how do you put us in the center and not capital? Well, creditism. You credit individuals directly with currency. And now all of a sudden, we're the center of the economy. Life is the center of the economy. We're investing in people and our capacity to grow as individuals, to be able to consume, learn, teach, and produce and co-create and develop. That is going to build a real economy rather than this extractive top-down command control system that we have at present. And so that's what's happening here. We need to undertake a fundamental evolution of value in the world and recognizing that the value doesn't come from the stuff. We're the source of the value in the world. And so that's what creditism is aiming at, is saying, hey, guys, we're focusing on the wrong stuff here. We're fighting for no reason over here when we can simply create the credit to incentivize and enable life instead of create the credit to give it to those who fucking, fighting to own the resources. What are we even doing here, man? Why are we even giving Saudi Arabia $1 billion a day? For what? For what? So they can maintain power and be dictators? Come on, dude. Silly. This whole thing is just, I can't believe it's gone on this goddamn long.
It's so true.
And
I think without a doubt,
or at least we can be.
I see a contagious model if you can get a working model, even in a small area, even in a local community. Like if you can create a thriving community with a brand new system, it'll catch on like fire. Like, what are you guys doing? How did you do that? Like, but how do you get that model going? Like, what does that look like? I mean, the people that are coming in for the first, people that are coming in as early investors, those guys invest and they buy like a chunk of land, and then you use the money from that land to give people money. Like, how does it work?
At the local level, George, I mean, a lot of people, there's some who claim that they figured that part out. I haven't really dug into their ideas and models yet, but I don't know that if it's possible, but if it is, great, I'm all for it. Okay, so there will be opportunities to reclaim local commons, to make local economies and local value flows more efficient and optimal and maybe even stable. While we're transitioning, but really the game, the structural, the current, there's a book I read called Law is Code. And again, it's nations who make the laws of their territory. And so it's, unfortunately, it's at that large structure that this change can only truly be implemented. The only thing you can do at a local level is it's a local exchange rate. We can do the same thing. Of course, we can create a currency when we're going to be. The IU token can become a local exchange trading currency that, of course, expands beyond your local territory and includes the entire world. Of course, you too can use it in your local community, and it can become the dominant tool in your community. But but it still not doesn't change the game. The game can only be truly changed by changing the laws of your country, changing the laws of credit and debt, of banking, and of course of property relations and corporations. And if you don't do that, well, then you structurally haven't changed anything. And so, unfortunately, the local towns and cities, they don't have that power. They really don't. And so you can't escape. As far as I can see right now, the path essentially is to attract the network, to have a local currency that is used inside the network to essentially flow more value towards more regenerative and cooperative and recapturing some more of the commons and housing or whatever it needs to be, energy systems, water, whatever are the critical needs of that local community can be done, outside of the capitalist regime. And so that's what we're trying to introduce with IU, that possibility of coordinating with one another and using your time, your skills, and your existing monies and values to flow them in different ways that you would have never done before. Because remember, we're still playing capitalism, so people are going to invest in their 401ks because they have to, right? Like I'm going to need this money in the future, and so I'm playing that game. But what all of a sudden, as we're building this alternative, and it grows, and more people are joining the network, and more of the activities are becoming oriented towards regeneration and capturing more local value, then we begin to change people's expectations and their willingness of how to invest, of where to invest their existing money. There's a lot of money in 401ks, in the stock market, in real estate, et cetera. A lot of that money could be, or some of it at least, could be altered and directed into different avenues. And so, but at present, majority of it is directed towards what? Making more money. Because we have to, because we need, it's the only way we can get money is by trade, is by making, right? Like either working or trading and owning things. And so that's the game we're stuck with. But all of a sudden, creditism is saying, hey guys, we can escape that game, and to the point where you won't have to worry about money. But unfortunately, it's going to require a level of kind of group building to change the political structure in not just in your country, but ultimately the entire world. But we can do it. It's possible. Is it going to be easy? Of course not. But the door is open for us. The technological tools are actually finally here. I know that I was saying this stuff like 10 years ago, where I was like, oh my God, look, holochain, we got this, we got blockchain, we got this, we got digital, democracy. Oh my God, we can totally do it. But it was in its infancy, and a lot of them were really still in development. But now the layers, the digital layers for coordination, for even recording the activity, the property, and all that actually is good, and it's ready. And so now the challenge is, do we have a organizing story? And can we create a planetary membership? Can we attract people to a network to build these tools so that they can be adopted and no one can stop them? And the answer is we can. But will we? I don't know. We'll see.
I think we can. I think it's inevitable on some level. I think that
it is. Who does it? I don't know. But
if you look at the central banks trying to create CDBCs right now, like they're already working on a new model because they realize the model they have is defunct. And you look at El Salvador, like they've moved on to like the Bitcoin standard, and it wouldn't take much for someone like Bahrain or like a small independent company to move to their own currency, like something on the blockchain with smart contracts. I think it's totally plausible that you could have a country with a fundamentally way better economic system. But then again, you risk the power of, the US coming and saying like, we're just going to kill you. You can't have that. Like maybe that's what's happening in Iran right now. Like they're not on the central bank system, Carry this for a second. I got to turn off my camera, but carry that conversation for a moment. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So you can do that. Any country can still do that, but you're still going to be playing the import-export game. You're still going to be playing the game of differential values based on trade at the national level, even though that national level is the culmination of all of the activities of your businesses is still at national level. So you can create additional currency. You can create but it doesn't matter if it's digital or not. I mean, let's be real. The U.S. dollar, for all intents and purposes, it's been digital for a long time, right? It's your bank account is digital. It's just a number. The physical, even though you can convert some of those digital numbers, and the government will do the accounting for you. You can delete some of your digital numbers and take dollars in the paper form. It's all the same thing. So these CBDCs, the scary thing about CBDCs that people are scared about is overblown. It's already happening. Like, money's already digital. The only thing that these guys are trying to do on an international level with the CBDC is basically trying to make them the transactions quicker. Because at present, bank clearing, as it's called, the transactions between banks, right, take some time to be cleared and confirmed. And so that's all they're trying to do. They're trying to create a digital record keeping that can speed things up. Now, the real fear that people have with CBDCs is the idea that these guys are going to somehow create a new international CBDC currency that would be centralized, right? And then replace all these other currencies and replace the dollar as the global reserve. And that's a real fear, by the way. That is a real possibility, but I don't see that happening personally, because I don't think, remember, the people who are really running the world, the ones who are ultimately in control of this entire structure, is the international banking cartel. And so if they create a CBDC, it's dangerous, because it'll open the door towards understanding the banking too. And they don't want, they want to keep their power of borrowing. Remember, I mentioned when I started this conversation early on, we have two types of corporations in the world: regular corporations and banks. Regular corporations are playing the same games as banks, almost, meaning like the game is to buy and sell. You have to buy something and sell it. You're trading, right? And so if the only money a corporation can have is through, is of their own or through investors, they're limited. They're limited to how much they can buy and sell. Imagine if all of a sudden, like, we were in the market, in the medieval times, whatever, we're trading apples and oranges and socks or whatever, and shirts in the market. And all of a sudden, but somebody has the capacity to create double or 10 times more apples than anyone else. It's going to, or money rather, it's going to create some problems, right? And that's what banks are able to do. So corporations have these limitations. Bankings don't. They are borrowing money into existence. So they have an advantageous position in this game of buying and selling. And so they're not going to want to relinquish that. The other part here, George, isn't that these guys are just selfish and greedy and maleficent like that. No, the reality is that they fundamentally actually don't know how to do it differently than the current debt credit structure. They don't. Right. The reason is because the fucking game is based on the stuff. And so you have to have that. And so debt actually helps to fuel growth and prosperity. And so you need money creation. You need somebody to be able to borrow money into existence to expand, and to crank that engine, if you will, of extraction and production and whatnot. And so money is that tool, unfortunately, and they just don't. They're devoid of ideas. They don't have an incentive to want to change it, especially since they have these privileged positions of money creation. And for that reason, they have no interest in even attempting to change it. And here we are stuck because of that freaking situation.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think it's Hanlon's razor that says, don't attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence. And this idea, right?
Exactly. That's what it is here. Honestly, it really is. Like I said earlier about myself too, I feel so dumb because we just don't ask the simple questions, man. Right. People just are not asking the most basic questions at all. And I love people who are like, oh, MMT is so stupid. The modern monetary theory. These guys are just, like, okay, fine, they're wrong. They're wrong in their prescriptions in describing, the monetary system. I say, okay, great. So then you describe it. Where does it come from? Tell me. Like, if they're wrong, well, then what is the correct answer? And they won't tell you, and they can't. They're so sure that that's wrong, but they don't know what is right. It's like, come on, dude. Where does it come from? Like, it's a simple question. Who creates the money?
Yeah.
But they won't talk about it. They won't answer that question because as soon as you do, it's obvious. It's like in the game of Monopoly. It's like saying, where does the money come from? Well, it comes from that pile right there.
Yeah, right.
And how does it come from that pile? Well, it comes from the rules. The rules determine the distribution. And so what are those rules? What are those rules in at present? Well, the rules at present is that the state gets to decide. It gets to decide and to spend as much as and create as much. But we're stuck in this situation just from what's that word? It's easy. We're doing what we're doing forever.
Right.
And it's not, I mean, it's not easy to change. It's not easy. This shift that we're talking about from capitalism to creditism, from distributing value, currency outside the sphere of trade, never been done before. Never been done before. And that's exactly what we would need to do. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Imagine we move to Mars.
Nice.
What kind of incentive game would you create on Mars? If we all moved 1 million people to Mars, are you going to pre-distribute pieces of valuable resources of Mars to only a few people? Are you going to let a few people say, oh, guys, whatever we extract from this piece of territory over here, all these minerals and rocks and other stuff, I'm going to get the money for that? Why? Why would you do that? How does that make any sense? But that's what we're doing here on Earth. The reason why we're doing that here on Earth is because the proximity, like who's going to own the fish, the trees? Well, obviously whoever can take it, right? It's banditry, I call it finders keepers. It's my fish. Now it's mine, dude. If you want it, well, you have to give me something for it. But the reality is it's not your fish. See, you stole it from us. If we're considering ourselves as one, as the resources of the earth as unowned, then you change the trajectory of distribution of the value in currency. Now you can reward currency and value to the person who caught the fish because they caught the fish and they brought it to the market, but it's not their fish. That's the key. That's what creditism is saying. Creditism is saying, look, that person, we don't need to give them money for the fish. We only need to give them money for catching the fish. We can recognize their contribution without assigning them ownership of the thing itself, and then making the sale of it subjective, like in the market. That's a game of power. That's always going to be winners and losers. And mathematically, if you do it that way, if you distribute value based on trade, and every trade is a win-lose proposition, of course it could be equal, but over time, the more transactions that are win-lose, what is equal? It yields inequality. It's math. It's structural. And so that's what we're saying here. That's what creditism is saying, is that we've built the foundation of our entire world on this game of capture and trade. And somehow we need to go back from the beginning, clean the slate, and stop playing that game and recognize true value creation, which is us and our activity, not the fact that we happen to have the fish or the tree. Sorry. It was never yours to begin with, and it should have never been yours. It's ours collectively, because as soon as it's yours, the incentives change. If it's your fish and your tree and your oil, well, your incentives are to extract as much as goddamn possible, because you win in that scenario. Meanwhile, the rest of us may not want to do that. Maybe we shouldn't cut all the trees. Maybe we shouldn't eat all the fish. Right. So this is what's happening in the world. There is no resource management, because the incentives are to those whoever can extract it and trade it. And so you're never gonna solve the environmental crisis, the inequality problem, or any fucking problem if we continue to play the game of capitalism. And so this is and this shift is philosophical too. Like, it's social. Like, we have to educate people, but not everyone has to know, like, not everyone has to be an expert. Not everyone has to dedicate 10 years of their life to studying economics and all these other things to understand this system. We're close. And I believe once we are able to produce short videos, animated videos explaining what we're talking about, creditism, et cetera, capitalism even, That's when we change. That's when the conversation will change. That's when people's understanding will change. And we're close to that place. Not there yet, but that's what we're launching now. Us going public is designed for us to be able to do that. And so if we can, if we can produce this kind of content, we can shift this narrative pretty quickly. And of course, then others can add their expertise and their bits and their storytelling and their flair, and make it even easier, simpler to understand than what we ourselves are capable of doing.
Yeah, it's so well said. And maybe it's not as far away as we think. Like,
it could happen quick.
Yeah, it wouldn't
Years.
take. Yeah,
instead of decades.
It wouldn't take that much just to shift some laws. Like, and I think with the next generation coming up, they see this. Like,
Exactly.
it used to be that the U.S. would take the tax money and fund technology, and then that technology would go to the people. It just got caught up in like DARPA, got caught up in these. Okay, you guys all fund the technology, and then we'll spin it off to a private corporation and then charge you for the money that we've already done. We've already created this service. You guys paid for it. Now we're going to charge you again for it. But it wouldn't take that much to change company charters, or like you look at some of these sovereign wealth funds where people are already getting money for what their company invests in and stuff. If that happened on a global scale, if we just shifted from this belongs to these people to this belongs to us, everybody would get a portion of it. I think that's what Elon was trying to do with AI. Is like everybody gets a portion of this. This is all of ours.
Yeah, but the problem there, though, George, is the traditional mindset is the portion that they're getting is the revenue streams, the flows from the input and so you're still playing capitalism. They're still stuck on this idea of value flowing based on exchange and trade. What creditism is saying is that no, value is just flowing because we exist. Value is already automatically conferred to people, and it's actually deleting when there's exchange and trade. When somebody's consuming something from the market, that's when the currency deletes. The currency isn't created to give to the capture of the resources. It's given to people as a universal flow for their activity. For the person who catches the fish, here's money. The person who brings the fish to market, here's money. But there's no owner of that fish who's also collecting money for having done nothing. Why? Why are we distributing currency and value to somebody who's actually not, to be honest, not only have they not done anything, usually they actually do negative things. They would have sabotaged the market in some way or another so that they can maximize their profit, which has nothing to do with the value creation or increasing the quantity or the quality or any of those other real metrics and real economics. None of it can be accounted for and can be incentivized in the game of capitalism. So Musk is, no offense, but he hasn't thought about these things. Like I know that. No offense to him. I'm not trying to downgrade his intellect or anything like that. But here's what I'm trying to say. Look, I don't know anyone. I've never met anyone in my real life who has investigated and who's dedicated their lives to finance, right? But that meant almost nothing in terms of my economic education. It was not economics. Finance is only one branch of economics. Economics has to do with life, labor, and the resources too, not just the money, not just the abstract stuff. And so that's the thing. Just because Musk has a lot of money, it doesn't mean he understands economics.
It's true.
He doesn't. And so they're trapped in thinking that, hey, the way to get money to people is if we make them owners, like co-ops, right? If we share the ownership, but you see, you're still distributing money based on ownership, based on owning what? Owning the subjective value of the thing that you own in market for trade. You're still distributing value based on trade, and it's not it's not a fair game, basically. Trade will never be fair because the prices are subjective. It's based on who's more powerful in that exchange, who needs it more. And unfortunately, dude, we all need it. Like, you can't live without food. You can't live without healthcare. So of course you're going to be willing to trade whatever it takes to save your life. That's insane. And so you're in a losing position, my friend. And so that's the game we want to play. That's stupid. You can lose every, you need to save your life. You need this particular medicine, and because they legally command this market and control that thing, and they're going to say, hey, we're going to take whatever we can from you. That's not fair. That makes no sense. You've worked your entire life to build a nest egg of hundreds of thousands or whatever, and all of a sudden you get one medical illness in the United States and without insurance, and you're screwed. Why? It makes no sense. So anyway, so that's basically the fundamental problem, is that this notion of distribution of value based on trade. And crypto by itself doesn't solve that. It's just entering into that universe and creating another abstract asset that is playing into this game of trade. It isn't ever going to produce an alternative. And it's certainly not an alternative currency. Dude, stop it. No, like I always tell people in crypto and Bitcoin, if the dollar didn't exist, what would be the price of Bitcoin? No, for real. Like its price is priced in dollars, right?
Right.
It's exchangeable for a certain quantity of another currency, of actual currency, the dollar. So if dollar didn't exist, then what would be its price? Like, where would you be pricing it? Another reserve currency, perhaps. But not, but what? But it can't be priced in itself. The Bitcoin, obviously one Bitcoin is always one Bitcoin, just like $1 is always $1. But what is its exchange value relative to other assets? Because remember, it's an asset. And so what is its exchange value? If the dollar doesn't exist, if crypto claims to be this, or Bitcoin claims to be this new alternative currency, then what would it be priced in? What would its value be? 2 donkeys? Well, donkeys are cheap.
It's so abstract. It's layers and layers and layers of abstraction.
It's again, these are exchangeable assets is what they are.
Right.
In the form of Bitcoin, it's an abstract asset. That's all. Stocks are themselves also abstract assets. They're fractional assets, fractional shares. But so if you and I had if Musk Tesla had never gone public, Elon Musk, a regular corporation, remember they have investors, they have their own capital, they're dependent on profit. If they don't make profit, then they have to get more money from somewhere else. They have to raise more money. They have to sell more of their company. Musk would have to sell more of Tesla to other people so he can take their money so he can continue running the business. And at some point, he's going to have to make a profit because he'll run out of shares to sell for more money, right? But guess what? That's what Tesla did. But what they did instead is they go public. What does that mean? So he's selling the shares to be into a casino, into a tradable casino, where now the shares aren't worth what the company's actually making, but they're worth whatever they're valued based on the future revenue stream of the company. So in Tesla's case, it's insane. At present, Tesla has a PE, price to earnings ratio, of 343. What that means is that Tesla is trading at, hold on 1 second. 1 second, George.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so Tesla is trading at 340 PE. That means that Tesla would have to earn the same amount of money they earned last year in profit, which is whatever, billions now, for the next 343 years. That's the value. So Elon Musk is able to pretend to have created value 343 times what in reality his company actually did. That's why he's worth 700 billion, because he's able to collect that value today as if he's already produced it. But of course he has. Tesla, the company, hasn't. To date, if there was a private company, Musk would barely be a billionaire. The company, as a matter of fact, was losing money all the way until like 2020 or something, 2022 or something like that. That was the first time they actually made a profit. Up until that point, they've been burning through money and losing money. And if it weren't for this stock market casino, him being able to sell his shares, and then those being able to be pumped up in value to, based on the future revenue streams, he wouldn't be. A regular business person is limited to their income. Their incomes are limited to their actual real profit now, not in the future. But of sudden, you create this fractional structure and allow them to be traded and speculated on. Then what the value of that can easily be pumped up by just creating more currency, and that's exactly what's happening in the world. More currency is created, pumping up more of these values. Where does the currency go? When you and I get money and we have savings, what do we do with the money? We don't invest in dollars. Nobody puts their money in their savings account and says, that's my investment vehicle. Of course not. You invest in things that make more money. You invest in stocks, bonds, real estate. You buy these assets. And because you have to buy them, right? Because if you don't, you will certainly lose to inflation. It ends up pumping the value of these things. So it's no wonder the stock market's at all these kind of record highs. And so this is what's happening here, man. The whole scheme is complicated, and most people don't understand it. But reality is that no one, especially even in capitalism, like Musk, shouldn't have the ability to pretend his companies earn 300 years into the future. That's absurd. It's absurd, dude. It's just, come on, it's silly.
Yeah.
No other corporation can do that except for public companies. That's stupid. So that's basically what's happening in the world. That we have this stupid financialized scheme, and we just can't break out of it, man.
I think what criticism does, at least the way I'm seeing it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sort of incentivizes the idea that relationships are the real currency and that there's value in those relationships.
You got it. It's us. Our coordinated activity is the source of value.
Right.
That's right. Without us, let's be real, without us and doing things, none of owners are doing shit. Without us actually doing all of the extracting, production, shipping, maintaining, upgrading and repairing, that's what should get value, not person who's selling and buying. That part of it, the exchange is necessary. Obviously, sometimes you're going to be producing things that aren't for you. Sometimes you're going to be growing more tomatoes than you can consume, right? But so others will have to buy those things. But why do we have to allow you to command more value in that exchange process by owning the tomato? You don't need to. We don't have to do that anymore. And so this shift in the source of value in the world is our future economic evolution. Now look, a lot of the design constraints and the value flows that we're now proposing inside what we're calling creditism aren't like fixed, right? We're still exploring the territory. We may not have everything right. We recognize that. We're not stupid. We're not arrogant. However, I know for certain that if we're going to get out of global chaos and war, this shift of of value creation is the key. And so, what the actual mechanics and percentages are of that value flow is going to be part of the new game and the new conversation, and it'll always be evolving and shifting a little bit. But that the fact that our activity is the foundation of the credit creation of currency is definitely the future. And if it isn't, then we don't have a future. Then we're going to definitely have chaos. We're going to kill ourselves. We're going to have ecological problems. We're going to have social problems. It's already beginning.
Yeah, it is.
It's already beginning.
It's already here.
We live in a world full of lies. And it's even worse now. Like we have now with AI and bots and all of these other fake people. how can you make sense of the world? You can't. If we don't transition, like we need to transition like very quickly, like I said, in years, not decades. If we don't do this soon, it's not going to be good. The longer we wait, the worse it'll become. We've already waited too long.
We have. But I think like what you're working on now, and there's a lot of people out there, like Yanis Varoufakis has some great ideas. I think that you have some great ideas, and
ours are better.
I
respect Yanis. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
But again, he's doing a lot of good. But he's obviously he's intensely studied economics, but he hasn't discovered this fundamental shift in value yet. Like what we're talking about with creditism, he's still stuck with the old thinking of like some of it. He does. He has the universal unconditional income. He's a big proponent of that, and that's easy. That's basic. That's actually a good starting point. Yeah. For any country to move towards creditism. You can begin right away with the universal, with an unconditional income. The challenge of doing an unconditional income in the current system, of course, is that it does create inflation, because the game is constantly of what? You're creating currency to extract resources to build up more and more assets and exchange them. And so you're just constantly pumping up just to produce more exchangeable assets. And Yanis hasn't yet quite discovered that piece of it. But when he does, he'll see the logic. And so I'm actually really excited at one point in the future, hopefully next year, that we get an opportunity to talk about some of this stuff, introduce these concepts to Yanis. And I'm convinced that if we can get through that guy, and we will, and he comes on board, man, we can really, drive this conversation into a higher gear. And so that's our goal. Our goal is to get the attention of some of these folks, begin these conversations, so they can begin to kind of see this design structure and either help us build it or improve it.
Well, I think we're doing it today, my friend. And I know that this is one of many conversations we're going to have, and looking forward to seeing all the things that come out of there. But Remzi, let's say somebody's watching right now and they want to reach out to you. Where can they find you? What do you have coming up, and what are you excited about?
So they can find me online through our website, of course. My email's on there. My face is on there. You can click on there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm all over the place. So it's easy to find me. That's easy. But what we're working on right now is, we're finally going public with this stuff. So if they can follow our Substack, that will be launched tomorrow. They can follow our YouTube, which will be launched next month. They can go to our website tomorrow when we launch the update, and they can then either donate to the project and join that the Patreon pool for the 1% of the IU. They can sign up to be partners, or they can join the early invite list, so that when we do launch the application, they can be among the earliest members to get invited to the network. But that's all you can do at this moment. Of course, I'm also open to anyone out there who has some ideas or wants to discuss some of these things personally. This is what I've been doing for the past 10 years, is talking about this kind of stuff and trying to understand it better and developing. I mean, that's how we developed it to the degree that we have, is through conversations with others. And so, I'm open. Anyone is welcome to reach out. Listen, we're a small team right now, but even our team is open. We're going to be looking to expand our team as well. So if there's other people out there who have who can contribute more than money or whatever, and they want to be part of our team, that's also a possibility. So as we move forward, that will expand as well. So we're looking to do all that. Hopefully, we anticipate the app launching, like I said, in about a couple months, and we anticipate the app opening up open to the general public 6 months after that, approximately. But it depends on the growth. It depends on our readiness and our, but there's a lot of pieces to this, George. It's not just me. It's not just Common Planet who's launching IU. It's an open membership architecture. So the key to the structure is to not only to attract as many people from the world, but attract as many other regenerative projects, so that what we're trying to flow value isn't to us and our foundation necessarily. Obviously, we need some support so we can produce the education, the media content. But in terms of the real value flows of during this transition of investing into regenerative projects, that's our main focus, is building this network of partners so that they can be supported, so that they can do their piece, because their stuff is real world now. Our stuff is theoretical and future, and it's going to take more time. Their stuff is active and in recapturing the commons today. And so that's kind of our focus. It's kind of a dual focus there. So there's a lot that people can do. There's a lot. It's going to be a big tent. It's a big, it's a planetary movement, essentially.
Yeah, it takes all of us. If you're listening to me right now, commonplanet.org. If you're watching the program, you can scan the QR code at the bottom right down there. It'll take you to the website. You can reach out to Remzi yourself. And Remzi, hang on briefly afterwards. But to everybody else within the sound of my voice, to Yahim, what's up, big dog? Stoked to see you. Douglas, awesome comments today, my friend. Thank you for dropping some truth bombs out there. Lila and Douglas. Thank you all, Desiree and Jacob. Thank you guys all for hanging out with us today. I hope you guys all have a beautiful day. And that's all we got. Aloha.